Welcome to Her Light, where we illuminate the untold stories of women who found their strength when the world tried to dim their shine. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever been treated like your contributions don't matter, this story will resonate deep in your soul. Please like this video if it touches your heart, and subscribe to Her Light for more empowering true stories. Now, let me tell you about the day I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop holding up the people who keep pushing you down. Are you here for the service staff entrance? Those were the first words I heard as I stepped through the marble doors of Ocean View Country Club, and they hit me like a physical blow. The security guard, a young man in his 20s with perfectly pressed uniform and judgmental eyes, looked me up and down like I was selling magazine subscriptions door to door. His gaze lingered on my simple gray cardigan, the one I would carefully chosen because it was my nicest sweater, my sensible walking shoes that had carried me through 37 years of teaching, and the tired lines around my eyes that spoke of sleepless nights worrying about money I no longer had. I clutched my purse in one hand and my grandmother's crystal casserole dish in the other, feeling every one of my 68 years settle into my shoulders like a heavy cloak. The dish was warm against my fingers, filled with the green bean casserole Derek had always requested for special occasions since he was 8 years old. The same recipe my grandmother had taught me during the Depression, when every ingredient mattered and nothing was ever wasted. "No," I said quietly, though my voice wanted to shake and my throat felt suddenly dry. "I am Margaret Peterson. This is my grandson's graduation celebration." I drove 4 hours from Bakersfield to be here. The security guard frowned at his clipboard, running a manicured finger down what looked like a very short list of approved names. Behind him, the club's main dining room sparkled like something from a magazine, all white linens and crystal champagne flutes catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through floor to ceiling windows that overlooked the Pacific coastline. I could see elegantly dressed guests already gathering. People who belonged in places like this, people who didn't get questioned at the door. "I don't see you on the approved guest roster, Mrs. Peterson, was it?" He said my name, like he was testing it, like it might be fake. "Madam, I am going to need to verify your relationship to the graduate before I can allow you inside." That is when Rebecca appeared, sweeping across the polished marble floor, like she was floating, all designer silk and calculated elegance. My daughter-in-law moved like she owned every inch of this place, which, in a way, she did now. Thanks to my money, her dress probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. A flowing creation in champagne silk that caught the light and whispered expensive with every step. Her hair was professionally styled in one of those effortless, looking-up does that I knew took hours and hundreds of dollars to achieve. Her smile was bright as freshly minted silver when she spotted me standing there with the security guard. But her eyes held something much colder, something that made my stomach clench with sudden dread. I watched her face transform as she approached, saw the moment she registered what was happening, saw the flash of annoyance she quickly masked with practiced charm. "Margaret, sweetheart," she said, reaching out to take my free hand in both of hers. Her manicured nails were cool against my skin, perfectly polished in a shade that probably had some fancy French name. Her touch felt like being handled by someone wearing expensive gloves. "We talked about this. Remember, we are going for a very minimalist aesthetic today. Very curated, just immediate family and Derek's college friends. You understand, don't you?" I blinked at her, trying to process what she was saying, trying to understand how immediate family didn't include me. "But Derek is my grandson," I said, confusion making my voice smaller than I intended. "I am his grandmother. I drove 4 hours from Bakersfield to be here for his day. I brought his favorite green bean casserole, the one he has been asking for since he was little." Rebecca's smile never wavered, but I saw something shift behind her eyes, something that made me feel like I was being assessed and found lacking. "Oh, Margaret, that is so thoughtful of you." "Really it is. But we have already arranged all the catering through the club's executive chef. Very contemporary presentation, very fresh and light, nothing too traditional. She said the word traditional like it tasted sour in her mouth, like it was something distasteful she had to spit out. Maybe you could just leave the dish in the staff kitchen? I am sure someone back there will appreciate a home-cooked meal. The security guard was still watching us, and I felt heat creep up my neck, that familiar flush of embarrassment and shame that made me want to disappear into the marble floor. Other guests were beginning to notice the commotion at the entrance. Well-dressed couples pausing in their conversations to glance over at the old woman being detained at the door, like some kind of party crasher. "Where am I supposed to sit?" I asked. My voice barely above a whisper. I had imagined sitting with my family. Maybe at the head table since I was Derek's grandmother. Maybe next to David so we could share proud looks when Derek gave his speech. "There is a lovely little table near the service station," Rebecca said, tilting her head with that patronizing expression people use when they are explaining something to a confused child. She gestured vaguely toward the back of the dining room. "Very convenient. Really, you will be able to keep an eye on everything from there. Make sure the staff is taking good care of everyone. It is almost like having a special behind-the-scenes view." I followed her gesture and felt my heart sink into my stomach. She was pointing to a small round table tucked behind a decorative screen, barely visible from the main dining area where the celebration would actually take place. The table looked like an afterthought, or worse, like something that had been added at the last minute for unwanted overflow. No flowers, no elegant place setting, just a folding chair that looked like it had been borrowed from a church basement, and a paper napkin that didn't match the linen ones on the real tables. Derek appeared then, materializing at his mother's side like he had been summoned. And my heart did that familiar skip it always did when I saw him. 22 years old and broad, shouldered in his cap and gown, looking so much like his grandfather Edward that for a moment I forgot to breathe. The same strong jawline, the same dark eyes that used to twinkle with mischief when he was small. But now those eyes looked past me, around me, anywhere but directly at me. He kissed my cheek dutifully, a quick peck that felt rehearsed and perfunctory, but his attention was already drifting toward his friends gathered near the windows. Young people in expensive clothes who looked like they had stepped out of a country club advertisement. His graduation gown was perfectly pressed, his cap positioned at just the right angle. Everything about him polished and prepared for the cameras that would undoubtedly capture every moment of this day. "Thanks for coming, Grandma," he said, but his voice carried that particular distracted quality young people use when they are checking their phones while talking to you, that tone that says they are already thinking about the next thing, the more important thing, the thing that doesn't involve the old woman standing in front of them. Moms worked really hard to make this perfect. So, just, go with the flow. Okay? Don't make it complicated. The words hit me like a slap. Don't make it complicated, as if my presence, my very existence, was a complication to be managed, rather than a blessing to be celebrated. As if the grandmother who had helped pay for this entire celebration was now being asked to minimize herself so everyone else could enjoy the day properly. I nodded because that is what I always did. I went with the flow. I smiled when I wanted to cry. I stayed quiet when I wanted to scream. I had been going with the flow for 3 years now, ever since I had made the biggest financial decision of my life to help my son David and Rebecca start Peterson Properties. Ever since I had refinanced the house Edward and I had spent 40 years paying off, liquidated my teacher's retirement savings, and put my name on commercial loans that were bigger than any number I had ever imagined. The luxury vacation rental business had grown beyond their wildest dreams, featured in Coastal Living magazine as the new standard for high-end vacation experiences, expanding from 3 properties to 15 stunning locations along California's most exclusive coastlines. Rebecca's Instagram account showcasing their properties had hundreds of thousands of followers who envied the lifestyle she curated so carefully. They were living the American dream, the entrepreneurial success story everyone wanted to emulate. But sitting at that little table behind the decorative screen watching servers in crisp white uniforms arrange crystal stemware that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I felt like a stranger who had wandered into my own family's success story by mistake. I felt like someone who didn't belong, someone who needed to be hidden away so the real family could shine without embarrassment. The celebration began with speeches, and I watched from my corner like a theater patron who had been relegated to the worst seat in the house. Rebecca stood at the head table, positioned perfectly in front of the wall of windows that showcased the sparkling Pacific Ocean beyond. She held the microphone with the confidence of someone who was used to being listened to, someone who commanded attention simply by speaking. Her voice carried perfectly across the room, as she talked about Derek's bright future, about family legacy, about building something meaningful together that would last for generations. She spoke about vision and determination, about the courage to dream big and the persistence to make those dreams reality. She mentioned David's business acumen and innovative thinking, Derek's academic achievements and natural leadership abilities, even their interior designer's creative vision for the new property they were developing in Monterey. Her words were polished and practiced, like someone who had given this speech before to investors and business partners. She talked about building generational wealth, about creating opportunities for Derek's future children, about the Peterson family name becoming synonymous with luxury and excellence in the hospitality industry. She spoke about the inspiration they had drawn from California's natural beauty, the careful attention to sustainability and environmental stewardship, the commitment to creating authentic experiences that would give their guests memories to last a lifetime. She didn't mention me. Not once. Not even a passing reference to the financial foundation that had made it all possible. The woman whose life savings had purchased their first 3 properties, whose credit score had secured their commercial loans, whose retirement fund had been transformed into their startup capital. I sat in my folding chair behind the decorative screen, listening to my daughter-in-law erase me from the story of our family's success, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. It was like watching someone edit you out of a photograph while you were still standing in the frame. When the microphone came around to family members, I watched Derek's other grandmother, Rebecca's mother Patricia, stand and deliver a polished speech about perseverance and dreams coming true. Patricia was everything. I wasn't perfectly coiffed, expensively dressed, comfortable in places like this. She talked about watching her daughter build an empire through hard work and vision, about the pride she felt seeing the next generation carry on the family tradition of excellence. The room applauded warmly for Patricia, heads nodding in agreement, people clearly moved by her words about family bonds and shared success. She basked in the attention, comfortable being seen and heard and valued. Then David stood, my son, 45 years old and wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. For a moment, looking at him up there in the spotlight, I remembered the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he had nightmares, who had cried when his pet hamster died, who had hugged me so tight when his father passed away that I thought he might never let go. But that little boy was gone now, replaced by this polished stranger who talked about family foundations and surrounding yourself with people who believe in your potential. His eyes swept the room as he spoke, landing on Rebecca with obvious adoration, on Derek with paternal pride, on several business associates and Derek's college friends with the calculating gaze of someone always networking, always building connections. His gaze passed right over my corner without stopping, without even a flicker of acknowledgement that I was there. When David finished his speech to enthusiastic applause, I felt a surge of hope rise in my chest. Maybe now someone would acknowledge that I was here, that I had been part of this foundation he kept mentioning. Maybe now there would be room for the woman who had made it all possible to say a few words about her grandson, about how proud his grandfather would have been to see this day. I started to stand, my legs shaky from sitting in the uncomfortable folding chair for so long, thinking perhaps I could approach the microphone and say something about Derek, about the little boy who used to help me grade papers, about the young man who had grown into someone his grandfather Edward would have been bursting with pride to see. I had things I wanted to say, memories I wanted to share, words of love and encouragement that had been building up inside me for weeks. But Rebecca was already back at the microphone, moving with the swift efficiency of someone cutting off a potential problem before it could develop. Her smile was brilliant and final as she looked out over the crowd of guests. "And that concludes our family remarks," she announced, with the authority of someone who controlled every aspect of this event. Her voice had that tone people use when they are drawing a line, when they are making it clear that the decision is final and not open for discussion. "Now let's enjoy this beautiful celebration of Derek's achievements. I think we are all ready to move on to the wonderful meal the club has prepared for us." I sat back down heavily, feeling the folding chair creak under my weight, my grandmother's casserole dish still balanced on my lap because no one had thought to provide proper space for it on my tiny table. The rejection felt like a physical blow, like being pushed back into my seat by an invisible hand. I had been dismissed, cut off before I could even try to speak. My voice deemed unnecessary in the chorus of family celebration. Through the decorative screen, I could see the main dining area where elegantly dressed servers were beginning to present the first course. Some sort of artisanal appetizer arranged on small plates, like tiny sculptures. Each plate was a work of art, carefully composed with microgreens and edible flowers and sauces, drizzled in perfect patterns. The kind of food that was meant to be photographed, meant to be shared on social media, meant to show the world how sophisticated and successful this family had become. A young server approached my corner, looking slightly confused as she glanced between me and the main dining area where the real guests were being served. She was probably college-aged, maybe working this job to help pay for school. And she had the kind of awkward politeness that comes from not quite knowing how to handle an unusual situation. "Madam, can I get you anything?" she asked softly, clearly trying to be discreet. "The family meal service is for the main dining area, but I think there might be some leftover sandwiches in the kitchen if you are hungry, or maybe some soup. We usually have something simple for the staff." Leftover sandwiches for the staff. At my grandson's graduation celebration, at an event I had helped pay for with money that once represented my security, my independence, my future, money I had earned by standing in front of classrooms for 37 years, teaching teenagers to write essays and think critically and find their voices. Money I had saved penny by penny, dollar by dollar, for the retirement I had always imagined would be comfortable and dignified. I looked at this kind young woman who was trying her best to take care of me, and I managed what I hoped was a gracious smile. "That is very thoughtful of you, but I am fine for now, thank you." I didn't have the heart to tell her that I was supposed to be family, that I shouldn't need leftover sandwiches at my own grandson's celebration. Through the decorative screen, I watched Derek accept congratulations from his friends, watched Rebecca pose for photos that I knew would appear on her social media within the hour, with captions about family pride and generational success. I watched David shake hands with potential business partners who might want to invest in Peterson Properties. Next expansion, watched him schmooze and network with the casual confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. Through it all, I remained invisible in my corner. The woman who had made it all possible, reduced to a shadow they would rather forget. A source of embarrassment to be hidden away behind decorative screens and patronizing smiles. The irony cut deep, deeper than any physical pain I had ever experienced. 3 years ago, when David and Rebecca had come to me with their business proposal, I had been their salvation, their answered prayer, the solution to every problem that stood between them and their dreams. I remembered that day so clearly, remembered how they had sat in my small living room in Bakersfield, spreading architectural plans across my coffee table, like they were unwrapping Christmas presents. Their credit wasn't strong enough for the commercial loans they needed to get started. Rebecca's previous business ventures had failed spectacularly, leaving them with debt and damaged credit scores that made traditional lenders nervous. David's track record was inconsistent at best. He had started and abandoned 3 different career paths over the years, leaving a trail of incomplete projects and disappointed partners in his wake. Banks looked at them and saw risk, saw 2 people who talked a good game, but couldn't deliver results. But they looked at me and saw opportunity. They saw a woman who had equity in her house. The modest two-bedroom ranch that Edward and I had bought 40 years ago and had finally paid off just months before he died. They saw retirement savings that had been carefully accumulated over decades of teaching high school English in the Central Valley. Money I had set aside dollar by dollar, even when times were tight, even when I was buying school supplies with my own money because the district couldn't afford them. Most importantly, they saw a good credit score earned through decades of careful financial management, a reputation for fiscal responsibility that banks respected and trusted. They saw someone who had never missed a payment, never lived beyond her means, never defaulted on a loan or declared bankruptcy, or made the kinds of financial mistakes that left marks on credit reports. And they saw love. They saw a mother and grandmother who would do anything for her family, who had been raised to believe that family came first, that personal comfort was selfish when loved ones were struggling, that a good woman sacrificed for the people she loved without counting the cost. I had signed the papers that same week, not just as a co-signer, but as the primary borrower on their initial loans. My house, my savings, my entire financial life became the foundation upon which Peterson Properties was built. The legal documents listed me as the principal investor and guarantor, with David and Rebecca as the operating partners who would manage the day-to-day business while I provided the financial backbone that made it all possible. At the time, I hadn't worried about the details. They were family. We were building something together. I trusted them to honor my sacrifice, to remember who had made their dreams possible, to include me in the success I was helping to create. But trust, I was learning in the most painful way possible, could be a luxury you couldn't afford to give to people who stopped seeing you as valuable once you had already given them everything they needed. When the cake was brought out, I watched the ceremony unfold, like a movie I wasn't allowed to be in. The creation was magnificent, a towering work of art decorated with gold leaf and Derek's initials scripted in elegant chocolate calligraphy. It must have cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. And it was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful, perfect, untouchable, designed more for admiration than actual eating. I watched from my corner as the family gathered around the cake table for the ceremonial cutting, and felt my heart break a little more with each person who was called forward to be part of the moment. The photographer, a professional hired specifically for this event, positioned everyone with the practiced eye of someone who knew how to create perfect family portraits. Derek stood in the center, handsome and confident in his graduation regalia, his smile bright with the joy of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. Rebecca flanked him on the right, one manicured hand resting on his shoulder in a gesture that would photograph beautifully. David stood on Derek's left, his chest puffed with paternal pride, his expensive suit catching the golden hour light streaming through the windows. Patricia, Rebecca's mother, was positioned beside her daughter, her silver hair perfectly styled, her designer dress chosen specifically to complement the color scheme Rebecca had selected for the event. Even some of Derek's college friends were invited into the inner circle, young people who had contributed nothing to his success, but who looked good in photographs, who would help create the image of popular, well-connected family celebration. There was a space where I should have been standing, a gap in the family formation that no one seemed to notice or care to fill. I could see it clearly from my position behind the decorative screen, the empty spot where Derek's grandmother should have been, where the woman who had funded this entire celebration should have been positioned with pride and honor. But I remained in my corner, watching my family pose for pictures that would preserve this moment forever, pictures that would be shared on social media and framed for mantelpieces and included in family albums. Pictures that would tell the story of Derek's graduation day, but a story edited to exclude the woman who had made it all possible. Derek raised his champagne glass for a toast, and the entire room fell silent to listen to his words. "To family," he said, his young voice carrying across the elegant dining room with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything he wanted. "To the people who believed in me and helped make this day possible. To the foundation that gave me the strength to reach for my dreams." The room erupted in applause and cheers. crystal glasses clinking together in celebration, voices raised in congratulation and joy. Through the decorative screen, I watched my grandson's face glow with happiness and satisfaction, watched him bask in the adoration of everyone around him. I waited, hoping against hope that he might glance my way, might remember the woman who had driven 4 hours with his favorite casserole, who had helped fund the business that paid for this lavish celebration, who had sacrificed her retirement security so his parents could build their empire. I waited for some sign of recognition, some acknowledgement that his grandmother was here, that she mattered, that she had played a role in creating the foundation he spoke about so eloquently. But his eyes stayed fixed on the main table, on the family that apparently mattered, the family that was visible enough to be photographed and acknowledged and celebrated. I was invisible to him, as invisible as I had become to all of them. A server approached my corner again, this time carrying a small plate with what looked like cake remnants and some wilted garnish. "For you, madam," she said kindly, her voice full of genuine compassion. "I saved you a piece before it was all gone. I thought you might want to try it." I stared at the plate, in her hands at the crumbled cake that had been Derek's celebration centerpiece, now reduced to leftover scraps deemed suitable for the woman in the corner, the same woman whose credit score had secured the loan for the property where this celebration was taking place. The same woman whose life savings had purchased the first 3 vacation rentals that launched Peterson Properties into the luxury market. The same woman whose retirement fund had been transformed into startup capital for the business that was now successful enough to afford celebrations like this. The same woman who was now being offered cake scraps like a grateful afterthought, like someone who should be thankful for whatever small kindness was thrown her way. "Thank you," I said to the server, because she was young and kind, and none of this was her fault. She was just trying to do her job, trying to be nice to the old woman who had somehow ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I didn't touch the plate. I couldn't bring myself to eat the remnants of a celebration that had excluded me so completely. Instead, I sat there in my folding chair, surrounded by the sounds of my family's joy, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. Not anger, exactly, though that was certainly building, not hurt, though that was there too, sharp and deep and cutting. Something clearer and more focused than either of those emotions. Something that felt like clarity arriving after a long, confusing journey through a fog of denial and wishful thinking. It was the moment when everything became crystal clear, when all the small slights and dismissals and exclusions of the past 3 years suddenly formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. It was the moment when I stopped making excuses for their behavior and started seeing it for what it really was. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, the one Derek had given me for my birthday 2 years ago, back when he still called me regularly, back when he still asked about my stories from the teaching days and wanted to hear about his grandfather's military service. I opened my photos and began scrolling back through the images I had taken over the past 3 years. Digital memories that told the story of my gradual erasure from my own family. There I was at the grand opening of the first Peterson Properties rental, standing awkwardly off to the side while David and Rebecca cut the ribbon for the cameras. I remembered that day so clearly. I had been so proud, so excited to see their dream becoming reality, so grateful to have played a part in making it happen. But in the photo, I looked like an afterthought, someone who had wandered into the frame by accident. There I was at Derek's high school graduation 3 years earlier, beaming with pride while he accepted his scholarship award, the one that was now paying for his college education at one of California's most prestigious universities. But even then, I could see the pattern starting. I was in the photo, but positioned slightly behind everyone else, slightly out of focus, like someone the photographer had tried to minimize. There I was at last year's Christmas dinner, serving the meal I had spent 2 days preparing while Rebecca posed for Instagram photos in my kitchen, her perfectly manicured hands arranging flowers I had bought, her designer outfit carefully chosen to complement the table settings I had selected. The photos showed a happy family gathering, but they told a lie about who had made it possible. In every single photo, I was present, but peripheral, acknowledged but not celebrated, necessary but not valued. I was the woman who cooked the meals but didn't get to sit at the table. I was the woman who provided the money but didn't get credit for the success. I was the woman who loved unconditionally but received love that came with conditions and limitations and fine print. I kept scrolling until I found what I was looking for. The contract signing photos from 3 years ago. The day I had put my financial life on the line for my family's dreams. In those pictures, I was front and center, the star of the show. David had his arm around me, his face glowing with gratitude and affection. Rebecca was holding my hand, her smile genuine and warm. Derek was giving me a thumbs up from behind my shoulder, his teenage grin full of admiration for the grandmother, who was making his parents' dreams come true. Back then, when they needed my signature, my credit, my sacrifice, I had been the most important person in the room. I had been valued, treasured, celebrated as the family's saving grace. Now I was eating cake scraps behind a decorative screen. Invisible and forgotten. I put my phone away and picked up my grandmother's casserole dish, cradling it against my chest like a shield as I stood up from the small table. My legs were stiff from sitting in the uncomfortable folding chair for so long, and I felt every one of my 68 years in my aching knees and tired back. The celebration was winding down, guests beginning to gather their things and exchange final congratulations. But I knew there was one more ritual to come. One more opportunity for my family to show me exactly where I stood in their hierarchy of importance. I walked slowly toward the main dining area, not because I expected anyone to notice me or include me, but because I needed to see their faces one more time before I left. I needed to witness the final act of this performance. To understand once and for all what my place was in this family, I had sacrificed everything to support. Rebecca was organizing a final group photo on the terrace overlooking the ocean, and I could hear her voice carrying across the dining room as she directed the positioning with the efficiency of a professional event planner. The golden hour light was perfect, she kept saying, her voice bright with excitement as she adjusted Derek's graduation cap and smoothed David's tie. This will be gorgeous on Instagram. The lighting is absolutely magical right now. This is the shot that is going to get thousands of likes. She was in her element, orchestrating the perfect family moment, creating the kind of content that would reinforce her carefully curated image as the successful entrepreneur and devoted mother. Every detail mattered to her: the angle of the light, the composition of the group, the way everyone's clothes complemented each other, and the stunning backdrop of the Pacific coastline. I stood at the edge of the gathering group, my casserole dish still in my hands, waiting to see if anyone would think to include me in this final memory. The photographer was setting up his equipment, checking his camera settings, and positioning himself to capture the perfect shot. Other family members and close friends were being waved over, arranged in a semicircle that would showcase everyone to their best advantage. Derek was positioned in the center, still wearing his cap and gown, his diploma held proudly in one hand. David stood to his right, his arm around his son's shoulders, his face glowing with paternal pride. Rebecca was on Derek's left, one hand resting gently on his arm, her smile radiant as she looked at the camera. The photographer raised his camera and began taking test shots, adjusting the positioning slightly, making sure everyone was visible and well lit. The group shifted and moved according to his directions, people stepping forward or back, turning slightly to catch the light better. Everyone working together to create the perfect family portrait. I waited on the periphery, holding my breath, hoping that someone would notice I was there, would remember that Derek's grandmother should be in this important family photo. I imagined stepping forward, finding my place in the group, being included in the memory that would commemorate this special day. But no one looked my way. No one waved me over. No one seemed to remember that there was another family member standing just a few feet away. Someone who had every right to be in this photo. Someone who had contributed more to this family's success than anyone else in the frame. And then Rebecca looked directly at me. And for a moment, I thought my prayers had been answered. Her eyes met mine across the terrace, and I started to step forward, thinking she was about to invite me into the group, about to correct the oversight that had left me standing alone. "Margaret, sweetie," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the space between us. "Could you step back just a bit? You are creating shadows in the shot. The lighting is so perfect right now, and we really want to capture Derek's big moment without any distractions." The words hit me like a physical blow. Step back, shadows, distractions, as if my presence, my very existence, was something that diminished their perfect moment rather than enhanced it, as if the grandmother who had made this celebration possible was now nothing more than an unwanted shadow spoiling their beautiful photograph. I stepped back until I was no longer visible in the frame, until I was once again relegated to the margins of my own family's story, until I became nothing more than a shadow they could crop out of their perfect memory. And as I watched them smile for the camera, their faces glowing with satisfaction and success, their joy unmarred by any thought of the woman they had just dismissed, I felt the last piece of my illusion crumble away like sand between my fingers. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource they had already consumed, a problem they had already solved, a source of funding that was useful when they needed it, but embarrassing when they wanted to celebrate. I was the woman behind the curtain, the one who made the magic possible, but could never be allowed to share in the applause. In that moment, standing alone on the periphery of my grandson's graduation celebration, watching my family pose for pictures that would preserve this day forever, without any trace of me in them, I finally understood the truth I had been avoiding for 3 years. I wasn't their beloved mother and grandmother who happened to help with their business. I was their silent partner, their financial backer, their means to an end. I was valued for what I could provide, not for who I was. The drive back to Bakersfield took 5 hours instead of 4, because I stopped twice to compose myself. Not to cry, though there were certainly tears that blurred my vision and made the highway lines waver in front of me. Not to rage, though there was anger burning in my chest like a furnace, but to think, to plan, to remember exactly what I had signed 3 years ago and what rights those signatures had preserved for me. I pulled into rest stops and sat in my car staring at the mountains in the distance and thinking about the legal documents that were waiting for me at home. I remembered conversations with lawyers, remembered clauses and conditions that had seemed like mere formalities at the time. I remembered asking questions that David had dismissed as unnecessary worry, concerns that Rebecca had waved away with her bright smile and confident assurances. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was setting behind the mountains that surrounded my small city, painting my modest house in shades of gold and orange that reminded me of the light I had seen streaming through the country club windows. But this light felt different. This light was mine, unfiltered by decorative screens or family expectations or the need to make myself smaller so others could shine brighter. I carried my grandmother's casserole dish into the kitchen, the same kitchen where David and Rebecca had spread their business plans 3 years ago, and asked for my help. The ceramic was still warm, the green bean casserole untouched and perfect, exactly as it had been when I had prepared it with such love and hope that morning. I put it in the refrigerator, thinking I would eat it tomorrow, thinking it deserved better than being relegated to a staff kitchen at a celebration that had excluded the woman who made it. Then I went to my home office, the small spare bedroom where I kept my important papers, my financial records, my memories of the life I had built with Edward. The room was exactly as I had left it, organized and quiet, filled with the accumulated documentation of a careful, responsible life. I pulled out the thick folder labeled Peterson Properties and spread its contents across my desk. Documents I hadn't looked at in months because I had trusted my family to handle the business side while I provided the financial foundation. There it was, all of it. The original loan agreements with my name as the primary borrower, my signature bold and confident on every page. The property deeds listing me as the principal investor, the one whose money had purchased the first 3 vacation rentals that launched their empire. The business registration documents showing my financial guarantorship of the entire operation, my credit score and reputation standing behind every loan and contract and expansion plan. the insurance policies that required my approval for any major changes, the operating agreements that gave me specific rights and protections, the bank accounts that were linked to my personal assets, my retirement funds, my home equity. Most importantly, there was the clause that David's lawyer had insisted on including, the one David had waved off as merely a formality when I had questioned its necessity. Section 12. 4. Principal investor retains the right to withdraw financial backing in cases of breach of fiduciary duty, misrepresentation of partnership terms, or documented evidence of personal mistreatment by operating partners. At the time, I had questioned why such a clause was necessary. "We are family," I had said to the lawyer, a kindly older man who had explained each document patiently as I signed away my financial security. "We will work through any problems together. We love each other. We are building something as a team." David had nodded, enthusiastically, his arm around my shoulders as we sat in the law office. "Absolutely, Mom. But the lawyers say this kind of language protects everyone involved. It is just standard paperwork. Really, legal boilerplate. It will never be an issue because we are never going to let things get to that point." The lawyer had given me a look I now realized was sympathetic. The expression of someone who had seen too many family business relationships go wrong. Too many good intentions destroyed by greed and selfishness, and the corrosive effects of money on relationships. But I had been so full of hope and trust that I hadn't understood his unspoken warning. Now, sitting at my desk with the golden light fading outside my window, I understood that David's lawyer had been wiser than any of us realized. The clause wasn't just paperwork, it was my insurance policy against exactly what had happened today. It was my protection against the people I loved most in the world, the people I had trusted with everything I had. I opened my laptop, the same reliable machine I had used for years to manage my finances and stay connected with former students, and maintain the careful records that had always been my way of staying organized. The screen flickered to life, and I began the process of documenting everything that had happened, creating a record that would stand up to legal scrutiny and provide the evidence I needed to protect myself. I typed slowly but deliberately, choosing my words carefully, describing each humiliation with the precision I had once used to grade essays and evaluate student work. The exclusion from the guest list, despite driving 4 hours to attend my grandson's celebration. The relegation to a folding chair behind a decorative screen while family friends and business associates sat at the main table. The denial of proper seating at my own grandson's graduation. The celebration funded by my financial sacrifice and secured by my credit score. I documented the offer of leftover sandwiches while family members dined on catered delicacies that cost more per plate than I spent on groceries in a week. The removal from family photos, literally asked to step back into the shadows so I wouldn't create unwanted shadows in their perfect memory. The complete erasure of my contribution to their success from every speech, every toast, every moment of recognition. But I didn't stop there. I documented everything I could remember from the past year. Each small humiliation I had swallowed. Each moment when I had bitten my tongue and smiled instead of speaking up for myself. The pattern of exclusion that had been building for months. The gradual erosion of my place in the family I had sacrificed everything to support. I wrote about the Christmas dinner where I had spent 2 days cooking and cleaning, while Rebecca took credit for hosting. Posting Instagram photos of herself arranging flowers while I stood elbow, deep in dishwater in the background, invisible in my own kitchen. The business meetings where my financial contribution was discussed in dollars and percentages, but my input was dismissed with phrases like, "That is not really your area, Margaret, or we appreciate your concern, but we have professional consultants for that." I documented the social media posts featuring Peterson Properties' success that never mentioned my name or investment. The magazine articles that quoted David and Rebecca extensively about their entrepreneurial journey without acknowledging the financial backbone that made it possible. The family gatherings where business talk dominated the conversation, but stopped abruptly whenever I entered the room, as if my presence made them uncomfortable, as if I were eavesdropping on conversations about my own money. Most damning of all, I found the text message thread that Rebecca had accidentally sent to me instead of her sister last month. It should have gone to someone named Margaret S. in her contacts, but my listing was Margaret P., and Rebecca's phone had auto-filled the wrong recipient. The thread included several messages about the graduation celebration planning, messages that revealed exactly how my family saw me when they thought I wasn't listening. "Just make sure Margaret doesn't try to take over the day," Rebecca had written to her sister. "She has this way of making everything about her generation's outdated traditions. You know how old people get. They think every event is about their memories instead of the person being celebrated. It is exhausting having to manage her expectations all the time." David had chimed in with his own message. "Don't worry about Mom, I will handle her like I always do. She is basically just the bank at this point anyway. As long as the money keeps flowing, I can manage her need for attention and keep her from causing problems." Rebecca's reply had made my hands shake when I first read it. Thank God. I was worried we would have to pretend to care about her boring stories and her Depression-era recipes. You know how she gets all sentimental about family traditions and wanting to be included in everything. At least she is too polite to make a scene. She will sit where we put her and smile, like she always does. There had been more. A whole conversation about how to minimize my presence while maximizing my financial usefulness. How to keep me happy enough to continue funding their dreams without actually including me in the reality of those dreams. They had discussed me like a problematic business partner who couldn't be fired because she controlled the money, a necessary evil to be managed rather than a beloved family member to be cherished. I had screenshot that conversation immediately when I first received it, though I hadn't known what I would do with it at the time. I had simply saved it as evidence of something. Some truth I wasn't ready to face but knew I needed to preserve. Now I knew exactly what it was evidence of. The complete and total disrespect of people who saw me as nothing more than a source of funding with inconvenient emotional needs. I attached the screenshots to my documentation, along with photos I had taken today of my isolated seating arrangement and the dismissive treatment I had received. Then I composed a formal letter to the business attorney who had helped structure Peterson Properties' financial agreements 3 years ago. The same man who had insisted on including the clause that was now going to save me. "Dear Mr. Rodriguez," I wrote, choosing each word with the care I had once used to craft recommendation letters for my best students. "I am formally notifying you of my intention to invoke Section 12(4) of the Peterson Properties financial agreement, effective immediately. Please find attached documented evidence of breach of fiduciary duty and personal mistreatment by the operating partners, including intentional exclusion from family business celebrations and public dismissal of my foundational investment in the company. As per the terms of our agreement, I am hereby withdrawing all financial backing, loan guarantorship, and asset collateral from Peterson Properties and its affiliated operations. I request immediate suspension of all credit lines and accounts tied to my name, social security number, or property assets. I will be available to discuss the legal transition process at your earliest convenience. Please understand that this decision has not been made lightly, but represents the only reasonable response to a pattern of exploitation and disrespect that can no longer be tolerated. Respectfully, Margaret Peterson." I read the letter 3 times before sending it, each reading making me more certain that I was doing the right thing. Each time, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me, the kind of peace that comes from finally making a decision you should have made long ago, from finally standing up for yourself after years of being taken advantage of. Then I sent copies to the business banker who managed Peterson Properties' commercial accounts and to my own financial advisor, requesting immediate freezing of any accounts or credit lines associated with my personal guarantorship. I sent additional copies to the insurance companies that held policies on the properties, notifying them that my authorization was being withdrawn and that they should contact me directly for any future approvals or claims. By the time I went to bed that night, The wheels were already in motion. My phone had buzzed several times with urgent-sounding text messages from David. But I didn't read them. Whatever panic he was feeling could wait until morning. For the first time in 3 years, I was more interested in my own peace of mind than in managing his emotions or solving his problems or making his life easier at the expense of my own dignity. I slept better that night than I had in months, maybe years. I slept the sleep of someone who had finally taken control of her own life, who had finally said no to people who had been taking advantage of her generosity and love. I dreamed of Edward, my husband, and in my dream he was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. The phone calls started at 7:30 in the morning, exactly as I had expected they would. David's voice was tight, with the kind of controlled panic that meant he had been awake most of the night, probably pacing around his beautiful house overlooking the ocean, probably calling lawyers and accountants and trying to figure out how to fix the problem I had created for him. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" he said. Without even greeting me, his voice higher pitched than usual. "The bank called this morning saying our credit lines are frozen. They mentioned some kind of investor withdrawal notification. They are saying we cannot access our operating accounts until this gets sorted out. Do you know anything about this?" I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee from the mug Edward had brought me from our 20th anniversary trip to Yosemite, watching the morning light stream across the photographs on my refrigerator. Pictures of Derek at various ages, pictures of family holidays that seemed to belong to a different lifetime, pictures of milestone moments when we all still seemed to like each other, when I still believed that love and sacrifice were the same thing. I invoked Section 12. "4, I said calmly, my voice steady and clear. "I am withdrawing my financial backing from Peterson Properties, effective immediately." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. I could almost hear David's brain trying to process what I was telling him, trying to understand how his reliable, compliant mother had suddenly become a threat to his business empire. Then his voice came back, higher pitched and strained. "You cannot be serious, Mom. Do you have any idea what this means? We have payroll to meet, vendor payments due, guest reservations we cannot fulfill if our operating accounts are frozen. We have got properties full of paying customers who are expecting service. This isn't just about us. This affects dozens of employees who depend on us for their livelihoods." "I am completely serious," I said, surprised by how calm I felt. "And yes, I understand exactly what it means. I understand that you built a business on my foundation and then treated me like I was irrelevant to its success. Mom." Rebecca's voice came through the speaker now, which meant they were together, probably in crisis mode in their beautiful home office, overlooking the ocean, the home office that my financial backing had helped them afford. "Yesterday was just a misunderstanding. We were stressed about the event planning. We weren't thinking clearly. You know how these big celebrations can be. Everyone gets overwhelmed trying to make everything perfect." "No," I said, still calm, still centered in that strange new peace I had discovered. "Yesterday was perfectly clear. You showed me exactly how you see me, exactly what my place is in this family. And I believed you. I believed you when you hid me behind a screen. I believed you when you offered me leftover sandwiches. I believed you when you asked me to step out of the family photo because I was creating shadows." "This is insane," David said. "You are destroying everything we have built because you didn't like your seating arrangement." "No, David, I am withdrawing my support because you have made it clear that my contribution has no value beyond the money I provide. You have shown me I am not family to you. I am just a convenient source of funding." "The thing is, Rebecca," I said, when she tried to interrupt, "I don't feel unimportant. I know I am important. I know I made Peterson Properties possible. The question is whether you know it, and based on yesterday's performance, the answer is no." After I hung up, I sat thinking about the difference between being needed and being valued. For 3 years, I had confused the two. accepting my family's need for my money, as evidence that they valued my presence. But they needed my money. They didn't value me, and I was done accepting that trade-off. The media attention started 3 days later when a young server from the country club posted a TikTok video about what she had witnessed. The video went viral with number GrandmaStories. And suddenly, my story was being shared by thousands who had their own experiences with exploitative family members. A local reporter called wanting to interview me about financial elder abuse. I provided a written statement instead. When family members use your resources while excluding you from recognition, they are not borrowing from you, they are stealing from you. The only difference is that the theft is emotional as well as financial. Peterson Properties' reputation unraveled immediately. Their social media presence became a liability when people shared stories about the family business that excluded their primary investor. Booking cancellations poured in, business partnerships dissolved. Within 2 weeks, David and Rebecca were facing bankruptcy. They made one final attempt to contact me, showing up with Derek. My grandson looked uncomfortable as he stood on my porch, clearly coached to appeal to my grandmotherly instincts. "Grandma," he said softly, "I am sorry about the graduation thing. I didn't realize how the seating would feel. Can we start over?" I looked at this boy I loved and felt my heart break. Not for the business failing, but for the relationship that might have been saved if anyone had bothered to value it before it was too late. "I am proud of you, Derek," I said. "I always have been, but starting over requires acknowledgement of what went wrong, and I don't think any of you understand what actually happened." David stepped forward, haggard from sleepless nights. "Mom, I get it. We screwed up. But this nuclear option is destroying everything. Cannot we find middle ground?" "David," I said gently, "for 3 years you have treated me like a silent partner in your business and an unwelcome guest in your family. You have taken my money while dismissing my opinions. You have used my credit while excluding me from celebrations. You have needed my financial backing while being embarrassed by my presence." I paused, looking at each of them. "This isn't a nuclear option. This is a natural consequence. When you treat someone as disposable, you run the risk that they will actually dispose of themselves." They left without another word, and I haven't seen them since. 6 months later, Peterson Properties was acquired by a larger company. David and Rebecca retained small consulting roles, no longer owners of the empire they had built on my foundation. Derek transferred to a state school with student loans. I felt sad about Derek's situation, but not guilty. His parents' choices had consequences, and learning to navigate them might teach him lessons his privileged situation never could. I used money from my house sale to buy a small cottage near the coast, close enough to hear the ocean, but far enough from my former family to build a new life. I joined a book club with women who had their own stories of resilience. I started volunteering at a literacy center, teaching adults to read, finding purpose that didn't depend on family acknowledgement. Most surprisingly, I started writing, not just letters, but stories about the challenges facing women my age in families that see them as resources rather than people. My first essay, published in a literary magazine, was titled "The Empty Chair." It told the story of a graduation celebration where the guest of honor's grandmother was hidden behind a decorative screen, while family members who contributed nothing sat at the head table. The essay struck a nerve. I received hundreds of letters from women with similar experiences, treated as peripheral figures in families they would financially supported. Many had never recognized their situations as exploitation until reading about mine. One letter particularly moved me, from a woman whose children excluded her from holidays while using her credit cards. "After reading your story," she wrote, "I realized I wasn't being generous. I was being used. Thank you for helping me see the difference." I started corresponding with these women, and slowly a network formed. We called ourselves the Empty Chair Society. Women who had been relegated to the margins of our own family's success stories. We shared resources about financial protection, legal rights, and emotional healing. I am 70 years old now, living alone in my cottage by the sea, and I am happier than I have been in decades, not because I am wealthy, though I am comfortable, not because I am surrounded by family, because I am not, but because I finally understand that being valued and being needed are not the same thing, and I refuse to accept one as a substitute for the other. My cottage has a small dining room with a round table that seats 4. When I host my book club friends for dinner, everyone gets the same beautiful place setting, the same carefully prepared food, the same warm welcome. No one sits behind decorative screens, no one gets offered leftover sandwiches, and at every meal, I remember the woman I used to be. The one who accepted crumbs and called them cake, who sat in corners and called it family inclusion, who gave everything and expected nothing in return. That woman taught me an important lesson. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop doing what you have always done. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the simple recognition that you deserve better. Sometimes the empty chair is the one you were sitting in all along, invisible and undervalued, until you finally stood up and walked away. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever felt invisible in your own family or undervalued despite your contributions, you are not alone. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to her light for more true stories of women who found their strength when the world tried to diminish their worth. And remember, your value doesn't decrease based on someone else's inability to see it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop accepting less than you deserve, even from family, especially from family. Because respect isn't something you can buy with generosity, and love isn't something you can earn by making yourself smaller. In the comments below, tell me about a time when you had to choose between being needed and being valued. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.